Vanessa Caldwell dragged her suitcase across the marble floor, the wheels cutting through the silence of the estate, and walked out the front door without looking back. Behind her, her father's voice still hung in the air, sharp, certain, and final. Ahead of her was nothing but a dark street, and a decision she had made in anger but refused to take back. She had her pride. She had her name. She was certain that was enough. What she didn't expect was the man standing near the gate. Andre Jackson, a stranger she had barely noticed at a diner just days before. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to say anything. But he looked at her the way no one in her world ever had. Not at her title, not at her composure, but at the suitcase in her hand and the look on her face she was trying so hard to hide. If you've ever watched someone successful fall apart quietly and find themselves in the process, this one's for you. Stay with me. Vanessa Caldwell did not believe in wasted time. She believed in results, in margins, in the kind of quarterly reports that made board members sit up straight and stop asking questions. She believed in 7 a.m. meetings and 11 p.m. emails and the particular satisfaction of walking into a room and knowing, before anyone spoke, that she was the most prepared person in it. She had built that reputation from the ground up, or so she told herself, which was the kind of thing people said when they preferred not to count the advantages they had started with. At 34, Vanessa was the CEO of Caldwell Meridian, a mid-sized investment consulting firm with a name that belonged to her family long before it belonged to her. She ran it with a precision that earned her admiration from people who admired that sort of thing, and a reputation for coldness from everyone else. She had fired people without flinching. She had restructured entire departments over a single weekend. She had once ended a meeting by simply standing up and leaving when she decided it was no longer worth her time. She had never once asked herself whether any of it was making her happy. That question, she had long ago decided, was not a useful one. Her father, Richard Caldwell, had taught her that. Not with words. Richard was not a man of unnecessary words, but through the architecture of her childhood, which was built entirely from expectation and performance. Praise in their household was sparse and conditional. Affection was expressed through opportunity, through investment, through the simple act of being allowed to sit at the dinner table while men twice her age discussed business. Vanessa had learned early that love, in her family, looked like being taken seriously. She had spent her entire life trying to earn it. The result was a woman who was, by every external measure, extraordinary, and by most internal ones, profoundly alone. Andre Jackson woke up every morning at 5:15, not because he wanted to, but because the overnight shift at the distribution warehouse ended at 5. The drive home took 12 minutes, and his daughter Maya needed to be at school by 7:45. That left him exactly 1 hour and 33 minutes to shower, make her breakfast, pack her lunch, check her backpack, braid her hair the way she liked, with the rubber bands that matched her shoes, and get her to the corner where the bus stopped without being late. He had been running this calculation for 4 years, since Maya's mother left and it became clear the math of their life was now entirely his problem to solve. He didn't resent it. That was the part people never quite believed when he said it, but it was true. Maya was 7 years old, and she laughed like she meant it, and she asked questions that made him think, and on most days, that was more than enough. What he did carry, quietly in the way that people carried things they didn't have the time or space to put down, was the loneliness of being the only person responsible for another human being's entire world. Not the loneliness of being single, which was manageable, but the loneliness of having no one to trade off with, no one to say, "I've got her tonight, get some rest." That kind of loneliness had a weight to it that didn't lift, even on the good days. He had learned through experience to be careful about who he let close. Not because he was bitter, but because he had once trusted someone who was performing a version of herself rather than being one, and the fallout had taken him 2 years to recover from. He had no interest in repeating that. They had met, if meeting was even the right word, 5 days before everything changed. Andre had taken Maya to a diner after her school concert, her small violin case still strapped to her back, her dress shoes already starting to pinch. He was coaxing her through the last few bites of a pancake when he noticed the woman sitting alone 2 booths down. She was dressed too well for the place. That was the first thing. The second was the expression on her face. Not sad, exactly, but the face of someone who had temporarily misplaced something important and wasn't ready to admit it yet. She left before he finished his coffee. He didn't think about her again, until the night he turned a corner near Caldwell Gate, and there she was, standing on the sidewalk with a suitcase and nowhere to go. The argument had started, as most of their arguments did, over something that sounded like business but was really about control. Richard Caldwell had called her into his study that evening with the specific formality he reserved for conversations he had already decided the outcome of. He sat behind his desk the way he always did, back straight, hands folded, the posture of a man who had never once in his life wondered whether he was in the right. He told her that her proposed restructuring plan for the firm's Western division was reckless. She told him it was necessary. He told her she was letting ambition outpace judgment. She told him he was confusing caution with cowardice. Then he said the thing that changed everything. "You want to prove you don't need this family to succeed? Then go. Walk out that door and build something without the Caldwell name behind you. See how far your judgment gets you then." He hadn't expected her to move. Vanessa had stood up, smoothed her jacket, and looked at her father for a long moment, long enough to let him see that she had heard him clearly, and that she was not going to pretend otherwise. "All right," she said. "Watch me." She had her suitcase packed within the hour, not because she had planned this, but because she refused to give him the satisfaction of watching her hesitate. She took her personal laptop, a week's worth of clothes, her wallet, and a phone that was already at 31% battery. She did not take the company card. She did not call anyone. She walked out of the estate at 9:47 in the evening with her jaw set and her pulse doing something she would not acknowledge as fear. The night air hit her immediately, cool and indifferent, the way nights always were when you had removed yourself from a heated room and were suddenly standing in the actual world. She wheeled her suitcase down the front path, through the gate, and onto the sidewalk. She had a vague plan involving a hotel, a rideshare app, and the quiet satisfaction of proving her father wrong by morning. What she had not accounted for was that her phone was dying. The rideshare app was taking too long to load, and she had not, in recent memory, stood on a public sidewalk alone at night with nowhere immediately to be. She was still staring at her loading screen when she heard footsteps slow beside her. "Hey!" She turned. It took her a moment to place him. The diner 5 days ago, the man with the little girl and the patience she had noticed from across the room. Andre Jackson stood a few feet away, a backpack over one shoulder, clearly on his way home from a late errand. He looked at her the way he had that night at the diner. Not intrusively, not with the particular hunger of someone recognizing a powerful woman in an unusual situation, but with the simple, direct attention of someone who noticed things and did not pretend otherwise. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said. The answer was automatic, the same way breathing was automatic. He glanced at the suitcase, then back at her. "You need help finding somewhere to stay tonight?" "No," she said. "Thank you." He nodded slowly, the way people nodded when they didn't quite believe you but understood it wasn't their place to say so. He said goodnight and kept walking. By 11 p.m., the rideshare had canceled twice. The first driver accepted the ride and then disappeared from the map without explanation. The second made it 3 blocks before turning around for reasons the app described as route conflict, which meant nothing. Vanessa stood under a streetlight with 6% battery, a suitcase that had seemed entirely reasonable to pack an hour ago and now felt like a punishment, and the slow, unwelcome recognition that the evening was not going the way she had intended. She was cold. Not dramatically cold, just the ordinary creeping cold of an October night in a city that did not care whether she had a plan. Her blazer was the wrong weight for standing still. Her shoes, which had always been perfectly adequate for walking from a car to a building and back, were not designed for sidewalks. She found a 24-hour pharmacy 2 blocks east and stood inside for 20 minutes pretending to read the label on a bottle of vitamins while her phone charged from a wall outlet near the greeting card display. She bought the vitamins and a bottle of water and went back outside. It was 11:43. She had been awake since 5:30 that morning. She was, beneath the composure she was still wearing out of sheer habit, exhausted in a way that went past tired and into something closer to transparent. She was sitting on the steps of a closed laundromat when she heard familiar footsteps again. Andre slowed when he saw her. He had come from the direction of a convenience store, a paper bag in one hand. He took in the scene, the suitcase, the steps, the posture of someone who had been holding themselves upright through will alone and was running low on will. He sat down on the step below hers, not close enough to crowd her, and set the bag between them. After a moment, he said, "The hotels in this part of the city book up fast on weeknights. There's a decent one about 12 minutes from here if you've got a way to get there." "Why are you still in this neighborhood?" she asked. "I live 4 streets over," he said simply. He didn't push. He didn't ask what happened or why she was sitting on laundromat steps at midnight with a designer suitcase. He just sat there, in the unhurried way she had first noticed at the diner, and waited. It was the waiting that undid her. She was accustomed to pressure, to negotiation, to people who wanted something. She did not know what to do with someone who simply stayed. "The hotel," she said finally. "How do I get there?" "I'll walk you," he said. "It's on my way." It wasn't, and they both knew it. But Vanessa picked up her suitcase, and Andre picked up his bag, and they walked the 12 minutes without much conversation, which was, she would think later, the first honest thing she had done all night. The hotel room was small and smelled like carpet cleaner and other people's mornings. Vanessa lay on top of the bedspread that first night, still fully dressed, staring at a ceiling with a water stain shaped like nothing in particular, and told herself this was temporary. She would have a plan by morning. She always had a plan by morning. By morning, the plan was survive the day. The breakfast was a vending machine coffee and a granola bar eaten on the edge of the bed with her laptop open, responding to emails in a way that gave no indication she was doing so from a room where the shower drain ran slow. Within the first week, she had found a room to rent through a woman in Andre's building, cheaper than the hotel, quieter than she expected. The arrangement was practical, nothing more, and Vanessa told herself that was all it was. The days that followed established themselves with a brutal efficiency she had not anticipated. Every small thing she had never thought about, laundry, groceries, transportation, the specific cost of eating one meal at a time with no kitchen to fall back on, arrived with an invoice. Not a financial one, though that too. More attacks on her attention, her energy, the cognitive space she had always spent on things that actually mattered. She had never understood how much of daily life was simply management until she had to manage it alone, in an unfamiliar neighborhood, with no assistant and no system, and no one waiting at home with anything prepared. By the second week, she had taken a data entry position at a temp agency 3 neighborhoods over, registering under her middle name, Marie, because she was not ready for anyone in her old world to know where she was. The work was repetitive and poorly lit and paid $12 an hour, which was the most clarifying thing that had happened to her in years. She filed documents. She answered a phone. She ate lunch at her desk from a container she had packed herself, because she had done the math and the deli downstairs was $4 more than she could justify. She had never done math like that before. She found she could not stop doing it now. Andre appeared in the margins of her days without making a point of it. He had connected her with the woman renting the room. He had mentioned once that the grocery store 2 blocks south was better priced than the one closer to her. He offered these things the way someone placed a glass of water on a table, without ceremony, without expectation of acknowledgement. What he did, without realizing it, was watch her, not intrusively. But Andre was a man who had spent years paying close attention to things that required careful attention. His daughter, his budget, the particular moods of a 7-year-old who couldn't always name what she was feeling. He noticed things. And what he noticed about Vanessa was that she looked at the world around her the way someone looked at a language they were only now learning existed. She was surprised by things that shouldn't have surprised her. The length of a bus ride. The weight of a full grocery bag carried 6 blocks. The way a landlord spoke to a tenant when the tenant had no leverage. She absorbed each of these with the focused expression of someone taking notes on a subject they had badly misunderstood. He recognized the loneliness underneath it. He had carried the same shape of it himself. The line between helping a stranger and being present for someone had begun, quietly and without his permission, to move. Maya was easier. Maya had no categories for Vanessa, no framework of what she should or shouldn't be, and so she simply accepted her the way children accepted most things that appeared consistently in their orbit, as part of the landscape. She asked Vanessa if she liked dinosaurs. She showed her a drawing she had made of their building. She told her with great seriousness that the second step on their staircase made a sound like a frog if you stepped on the left side. For the first time in longer than she could account for, Vanessa laughed at something she hadn't scheduled. It was a Tuesday when Vanessa walked into the bakery by accident. She had been looking for a pharmacy and taken a wrong turn off the main street, ending up on a quieter block lined with a laundromat, a tax office, and a small bakery with a hand-painted sign in the window that read "Rosas" in uneven yellow letters. The smell reached her before she made any conscious decision. Warm bread, something with cinnamon. And she pushed the door open the way you pushed open a door when your body had already decided before your mind caught up. The woman behind the counter had her back turned, sliding a tray from the oven with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times. She wore a yellow apron, her dark hair pinned back, and when she turned around to greet whoever had come in, her expression shifted through several things very quickly. Recognition, something guarded, and then, after a pause that Vanessa felt in her chest, a deliberate stillness. Vanessa knew her immediately. Gloria Reyes had worked the early morning cleaning shift at Caldwell Meridian for 6 years. 18 months ago, Vanessa had signed off on a restructuring plan that eliminated the in-house facilities contract entirely and outsourced it to a third-party vendor. 41 people had been let go in a single Friday afternoon. In the spreadsheet Vanessa had reviewed, they were a line item under operational overhead reduction. She had approved it in under 4 minutes. She had not thought about any of their names since. She thought about Gloria's name now. "Miss Caldwell," Gloria said, not coldly, not warmly, simply as a fact. "Gloria," Vanessa said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Neither of them moved for a moment. Vanessa's first instinct was to explain herself, to say something that reframed the situation, that established context, that put her back on familiar ground. She was very good at that. She had been doing it her entire career. She didn't do it. She stood in the doorway of a small bakery that smelled like something honest and looked at a woman she had reduced to a line item and could not find a single useful thing to say. Gloria looked at her, really looked at her, in the unhurried way of someone who had nothing left to lose from honesty. And what she saw apparently settled something, because her expression softened by a degree that Vanessa had not earned and did not deserve. "You look tired," Gloria said simply. "Sit down." Vanessa sat. She did not know why, but something about being told to sit down by a woman who owed her nothing, told gently, without irony, removed a layer of resistance she hadn't known she was still carrying. Gloria sliced a piece of bread from a loaf on the counter, warm and dense, and set it on a small plate in front of her with a paper napkin. No butter, no ceremony, just bread, the way you gave bread to someone who needed to eat something before they could do anything else. "You don't have to say anything," Gloria said, returning to her side of the counter. "I'm not looking for an apology." Vanessa looked up. "You should be." Gloria considered this. "Maybe," she said, "but what I needed 18 months ago and what I need today are different things. Back then I needed my job." She glanced around the bakery, the mismatched chairs, the hand-lettered menu, the small framed photo of 2 children on the wall behind her. "Now I need this place to break even by April." She said it without bitterness. That was the thing Vanessa could not get past, the complete absence of bitterness in a woman who had every right to it. "There are times," Gloria said, sliding a second napkin across the counter, "when people need to be given something decent just to keep moving. That's all this is." Vanessa looked down at the bread. Her throat tightened in a way she did not try to manage or explain away. She ate it slowly, said very little, and when she left, she was not the same person who had walked in. The weeks settled into a shape Vanessa had not anticipated, something close to ordinary. The evenings, more often than not, ended up at Andre's. It began practically. Maya had taken to stopping by Vanessa's door on her way home from school, and it seemed easier after a while to simply walk back with her than to send a 7-year-old up the stairs alone. Andre would come home to find them at the kitchen table, Maya explaining something with great urgency, while Vanessa listened with the focused attention she had once reserved for earnings calls. He would set down his bag and start dinner. There was a rhythm to it that none of them had planned and none of them named. One evening, Andre came home later than usual. Vanessa heard his key in the lock from the couch. He came through the door with the specific quality of exhaustion that went past the body, the kind that lived in the jaw, in the set of the shoulders. Maya ran to him. He held her, and his eyes closed briefly in the way that parents' eyes closed when they were taking something in. Then he put her down gently, told her to get ready for bed, and walked to the front step. He sat down on the threshold, his back against the door frame, and did not go in. Vanessa stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she went and sat beside him. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not offer a solution. She sat beside him in the cool night air and let the silence be what it was. After a while, Andre said, "I've been at it for 4 years and I still don't know how to explain to her why we can't do certain things." "Does she ask?" Vanessa said. "No," he said. "That's what gets me. She doesn't ask. She just adjusts." He was quiet for a moment. Kids shouldn't have to adjust that much. Vanessa thought about what it meant to move through a world that required constant adjustment without anyone acknowledging the cost of it. She had never adjusted to anything. She had always simply demanded that things accommodate her instead. "She knows she's loved," Vanessa said finally. "That's not a small thing." Andre looked at her sideways, the look of a man not sure if he was being consoled or understood. Then he turned back to the street, and something in his posture very slightly released. Vanessa understood, sitting beside him on that step, that something had shifted. She was no longer someone he was looking after. She had, without planning to, become someone he could be tired in front of. That was a different kind of trust entirely. It was the following week that the careful architecture of her temporary life began to come apart. It started with a phone call she took in the building stairwell, away from the apartment, thinking she was out of earshot, from her director of operations, who addressed her by her full name and title in the first sentence. She came back upstairs and found Andre in the kitchen. He didn't look at her differently. He said dinner was almost ready. His voice was exactly the same as it always was, which was somehow worse than if it had changed. 3 days later, she was walking through her old neighborhood. She had gone to pick up a few personal items she'd left behind, when a former colleague spotted her on the street, called out, "Vanessa Caldwell!" with the bright surprise of someone encountering the unexpected, and shook her hand while loudly noting she'd heard she'd stepped back from the firm. Vanessa extracted herself in under 2 minutes and took a different route home. That evening, when she arrived at Andre's to pick up a book Maya had wanted to lend her, Andre opened the door and looked at her for a moment before stepping aside. Maya was already in bed. The apartment was quiet. "How long were you planning to tell me?" he said. His voice was calm. That was the thing about Andre. He did not raise his voice when he was hurt. He went quieter, and the quiet had a weight to it that Vanessa felt in her sternum. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because every answer she had was exactly the kind of thing the old Vanessa would have reached for. And she was standing in front of a man who had shown her, without ever saying it directly, what it looked like when someone simply told the truth. "I was scared," she said. It was the most honest sentence she had spoken in years. Andre nodded slowly. He did not say, "That's understandable." He looked at her with the expression of a man who had learned, at significant cost, that fear was not an excuse for the particular damage done by choosing silence over honesty. "Maya talks about you every day," he said quietly. "You understand what that means." Vanessa understood exactly what that meant. And the weight of it, the specific, terrible weight of having become real to a child who did not yet know what real cost, settled over her and did not lift. She left that night without the book. The newspaper was from 4 months ago. Maya found it at the bottom of a box of old craft supplies she had dragged out from under the hallway bench. She pulled it out because she needed the cardboard inside for a school project. She unfolded it on the kitchen floor, looked at the front page of the business section, and tilted her head. "Bah!" she called. "This lady looks like Vanessa." Andre came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder. He crouched beside Maya and looked at the page she was pointing to. The photograph was from a profile piece. Vanessa at her desk, composed and precise, the Caldwell Meridian logo visible on the wall behind her. The headline read, "Vanessa Caldwell, 34, on leading without apology." Andre read it once. Then he stood up slowly, folded the newspaper, and set it on the counter. "Go finish your project, baby," he said. His voice did not change. Maya looked at him for a moment with the particular attention of a child who understood more than she was supposed to, then went back to her room. Andre stood in the kitchen for a long time. He didn't call Vanessa. He simply waited. And when she knocked on the door the following evening at the usual time, he opened it, and she saw immediately that he knew. She did not reach for a framing. She stood in the doorway and said, "I was going to tell you." "When?" he asked. She didn't have an honest answer to that. Andre stepped back to let her in, but the apartment felt different. The same rooms, the same light, but with the quality of a space where something had shifted and not yet settled. He stood near the window, arms crossed, not in anger exactly, but in the way of a man holding himself together deliberately. "I don't care that you have money," he said. "I don't care about any of that." He paused. "What I care about is that you came into this house, into Maya's life, while keeping something that big to yourself. After everything." He stopped, started again. "I've been down this road. Someone showing me a version of themselves that turned out to be a performance. I told myself I'd never let that happen again." "It wasn't a performance," Vanessa said. "Everything that happened here was real." "Maybe," he said, "but real things get built on truth, not on what someone decides to leave out." She didn't argue. He was right, and they both knew it. And the only thing worse than knowing it was understanding exactly why it hurt him the way it did. Not from the outside, as a concept, but from the inside, as a person who had sat beside him on a dark front step and learned what he was afraid of without ever choosing to be honest about what she was hiding. "Maya asked me this morning if you were coming," he said quietly. He looked out the window. "I didn't know what to tell her." That was the sentence that broke something open in Vanessa's chest. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that things broke when they had been under pressure for a long time and finally gave. She left without being asked to. She walked down the stairs and out into the night, and the city moved around her, indifferent, continuous, entirely unconcerned. And she understood, standing on the sidewalk where this had all begun, that she had just lost the only place she had ever genuinely wanted to be. She went back to Caldwell Meridian on a Monday. There was no dramatic return, no announcement, no meeting called to mark her reappearance. She simply walked in through the glass doors at 7:45 in the morning, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and sat down at her desk. Her assistant Derek brought her a coffee and a summary of what had accumulated in her absence. She thanked him. She opened her laptop. She began to work. The office was exactly as she had left it. That was the first thing she noticed, how completely unchanged it was, as though the weeks she had spent in a room with a broken radiator and a two-burner stove had happened in a parallel world that left no trace here. The same gray carpet, the same framed awards on the wall, the same view of the city from a height that made everything below look orderly and manageable, which she now understood was one of the more expensive illusions money could buy. She signed documents before 10 a.m. She reviewed a restructuring proposal for the firm's northern accounts and caught herself reading the names in the personnel column, actually reading them one by one, before she realized what she was doing and why it felt different from before. She called Derek in. "This proposal, the facilities reduction on page 9, how many people are we talking about?" Derek checked the attachment. 31, I believe. "Get me their tenure records," she said, "before I sign anything." Derek looked at her for a moment, not long enough to be impolite, but long enough to register that this was not something she had asked for before. "Of course," he said, and left. Vanessa looked at the proposal for a long time without signing it. Her father called on Wednesday. "I've heard you're back," Richard said. "I'm back," she confirmed. "And?" She considered the question, what it was really asking underneath the brevity. Her father did not know how to ask whether she was all right. What he was asking, in the language they had always spoken, was whether she had won or lost. "I learned some things," she said. "What kind of things?" She thought of Andre on the front step. She thought of Gloria's bakery and the bread that asked nothing of her. She thought of Maya's face when she laughed, unreserved and total, the way people laughed when they hadn't yet learned to be careful with their joy. "The kind you can't learn here," she said. Richard did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice had shifted by something small but measurable. Not softened exactly, but less certain of its own weight. "Are you all right, Vanessa?" It was the first time in her memory that he had asked her that without the question meaning, "Are you performing well?" She was not sure he knew he had asked it differently, but she heard the difference. "Not yet," she said honestly, "but I think I'm getting there." She passed a school bus on her walk home Thursday evening. A little girl pressed her face briefly against the window. Not Maya, a stranger, someone else's child. And Vanessa stopped walking on the sidewalk while the bus moved on. She stood there longer than made sense. She thought about what Andre had said. Real things get built on truth. She had spent her entire career building things. Structures, strategies, systems. All of it precise, all of it deliberate. She was very good at building things. She had never once tried to build something true. The distinction felt enormous. She held it carefully, the way you held something you were only beginning to understand the weight of. She turned toward home and walked slowly, thinking not about what was strategic, not about what would win, but about what was true. She went to the bakery first. It was a Saturday morning, early enough that the street was still quiet, and Gloria was unlocking the front door when Vanessa arrived. Gloria looked at her, then at the time, then stepped aside. Vanessa sat at the same small table as before. She folded her hands and said, "I'd like to hear what happened. After, if you're willing to tell me." Gloria studied her for a moment. Then she pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. She talked for 40 minutes, not with anger. The anger, she said, had burned itself out somewhere around the third month when she'd realized it was costing her more than it was costing anyone else. She talked about the weeks of applications and the particular humiliation of explaining a gap in employment to people who had never had to survive one. She talked about her daughter, who had been 9 at the time, and the conversation they'd had when Gloria explained that summer camp wasn't happening that year. She talked about the moment she'd decided to use her severance on a commercial oven instead of a security deposit on a bigger apartment, and how that decision had felt like jumping off something with no guarantee of landing. Vanessa listened. She did not take notes. She did not offer solutions or reframe anything. She simply listened, not for the information, but for the person delivering it. When Gloria finished, Vanessa said, "I'm sorry," not as an explanation, just, "I'm sorry." Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then, "You came here. That's the part that matters." She stood, went behind the counter, and came back with 2 cups of coffee and a piece of bread set between them like punctuation. They sat together without talking about anything that required resolution. When Vanessa finally stood to leave, Gloria said, "Go do what you came here to do." Vanessa walked to Andre's building. She had not called ahead. She stood outside the door longer than she would have admitted, then knocked. The same quiet knock, the same rhythm, and waited. Andre opened the door. He looked at her without surprise, as though some part of him had been expecting this. Behind him, the apartment was Saturday morning quiet. Maya was still asleep. "Can I come in?" Vanessa asked. He stepped back. She stood in the middle of the small living room where she had spent more evenings than she could count and looked at the man who had, without ever intending to, become the most honest mirror she had ever looked into. "I'm not here to explain myself," she said. "I'm not here to make a case. I just need you to know some things." He waited. I have spent my entire life performing competence for people who only wanted to see me succeed. I had no idea what I was doing to the people who weren't in the room." She paused. "I signed off on letting go of over 40 people the same week I approved a catering budget for a client dinner. I didn't think about a single one of them again, until I was standing in Gloria's bakery eating bread she had no reason to give me." Andre said nothing. "You and Maya are the first people in my life who made me feel like a person instead of a position," she continued. "I hid who I was because I was afraid that if you knew, you'd see me the way I was starting to see myself, as someone who hadn't earned any of this." She met his eyes. "That wasn't fair to you. It wasn't fair to Maya, and it was the exact kind of thing I should have known better than to do." The apartment was very quiet. "I'm not asking you to trust me again right now," she said. "I know that's not how it works. I'm asking for the chance to be in a room with you without hiding anything. That's all." Andre looked at her for a long time, the face of a man taking something seriously, weighing it against everything he knew about the cost of getting it wrong. She did not try to tip the scale. She stood still and let him look. Then he said, "You want coffee?" It was not forgiveness. It was not a resolution. It was a door, opened by a fraction, enough to step through if she did it carefully. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." Maya woke up 20 minutes later. She came out of her bedroom in her pajamas with the small, unhurried certainty of a child who had not yet learned to brace for disappointment. And when she saw Vanessa sitting at the kitchen table, her face opened completely, without calculation, without condition. "You came back," Maya said. "I came back," Vanessa said. Maya climbed into the chair beside her and leaned against her arm the way she sometimes did, comfortable and entirely unself-conscious, and asked if she wanted to see the drawing she had finished for school. Vanessa said yes. Maya went to get it. Andre stood at the counter, his back partially turned, and Vanessa understood that this was what it looked like. Not a resolution, not a clean ending, but the ordinary, imperfect business of people deciding to keep trying. There was no ceremony to it. There was just coffee getting cold, and a child returning with a drawing, and a Saturday morning behaving exactly like a Saturday morning. She looked at the drawing Maya set in front of her, their building rendered in crayon with 3 figures standing outside it. A tall man, a small girl, and a woman with dark hair and a suitcase beside her feet. Maya had drawn them all holding hands. Vanessa looked at it for a long time. "Is that me?" she asked, pointing to the figure with the suitcase. "That's when you first came," Maya said seriously. "Before you stayed." She did not move into the building. She did not restructure her life around theirs. What changed was quieter than that, and more durable. She went back to Caldwell Meridian and ran it differently. Not perfectly, not without error, but with the specific attention of someone who had learned to read the names in the personnel column before signing anything. She called a meeting with her operations team and told them plainly that the firm's current model for workforce decisions required a more rigorous human review process before implementation. The room was quiet in the way rooms were quiet when people were surprised but did not want to show it. She did not explain herself further. She did not need to. She visited Gloria's bakery on the first Saturday of every month, not to repay a debt, but because she had discovered that sitting across from someone who had no reason to flatter her was one of the more clarifying experiences available to her. Gloria was doing better. The bakery had broken even in March. The thing she had thought was strength, the certainty, the control, the performance of someone who never needed anything from anyone, she understood now as a different kind of fear. The fear of being seen without credentials, of being found underneath all of it to be ordinary. She was, in fact, ordinary. She was beginning to think that was not the disaster she had always treated it as. On a Saturday evening in early spring, Vanessa sat on the front step of Andre's building with a cup of tea going cold in her hands, watching Maya draw chalk figures on the sidewalk below. Andre sat beside her. The street was quiet, the light going amber the way it did in the hour before dark, and Maya was narrating her drawings to no one in particular with the full confidence of a person whose audience was entirely internal. Vanessa thought about the night she had walked out of her father's house with a suitcase and a phone at 19%, and the absolute certainty that she was the most capable person in any room she entered. She had been so sure of what she was. She looked at the chalk figures on the sidewalk, lopsided, bright, stubbornly impermanent, and thought, this is what it looks like to begin. She did not look away. There's something this story keeps coming back to, that the most important things we learn rarely come from the people who are supposed to teach us. They come from a stranger who stays when they don't have to, from someone we wronged who hands us bread anyway, from a child who draws us into a picture before we've earned our place in it. If that landed with you, if you've ever been humbled by someone who had every reason not to be kind, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. New ones go up every week, and I'd love for you to be here for them.